Let's try to get this video going while I still got a little bit of daylight. It's 4th of July. I guess I'll be able to see the fireworks from where I am. I may go outside, I don't know. We're reading from Spare the Kids by Stacey Patton, one of the most important books. I almost bought a copy, um, but I went with a book on herbs and spices, healing herbs and spices instead. But I may end up getting a copy of this. Uh, One of the most important books ever written as far as black people are concerned, but it can be extended out to all human beings. In ancient Greece, a disobedient son could lose his tongue, eye, or fingers. Greek infants born with deformities were considered unfit to be raised and thus killed in order to preserve ideal racial characteristics. Young boys and girls suffered routine sexual molestation by older men. A young person could be kept as a pet child for entertainment and pedophilic gratification, or sold into slavery and hard labor by a parent as payment or collateral for debts, even as late as the 19th century, that's the 1800s. American medical journals reported regular findings of sexually transmitted diseases on children's anuses, genitals, and mouths when their parents had the disease. So this, by the way, when they're talking about Greek people being kept as pet, that's mentors, if I understand right, and that's what the Greek fraternities were doing. That's why I had a black guy that wanted me to join the fraternity with him. We worked in the catering hall together, and he kept saying, "Man, we should join, we should join, we should join." And I was in CUNY at the time, City University of New York. I didn't even know you could do that from there. And he was like, "Yeah, you could do it, we could do it." I said, "All right, man, let me go research." And I started researching Greek fraternities. I got a book on it. Man, I said, I can't do it, man. I can't do it. I did research on what a Greek fraternity is. I can't do it. And I know black fraternities say they have turned it into something else, but back then I was very radical and very, and I was like, nah, I can't do it. And I always felt like, and I still think this would be better, just my personal opinion, if fraternities were named after figures. Like, we should have a Harriet Tubman sorority. We should have a Ida B. Wells sorority. We should have a Frederick Douglass fraternity. We should have an abolition fraternity and sorority. We should have a David Walker fraternity. I think if that was the case, I would join the fraternity in no time. And back then, I didn't realize you can join fraternities for academics too. But I didn't know that back then. Or else I would have told him, let's join a fraternity for academics. I was 19, 20. I was learning. And to be honest, I was trying to figure out how to become the best, how I could do to make the most contributions to my community before my community was completely gone. But it was the 90s, and the community was disintegrated just about. So I really was wasting my time, but I didn't know it. We don't know sometimes in real time. From royals to regular folk, centuries of Europeans grew up with severe beatings being a regular part of a child's life. This is of little surprise given the dominant beliefs, according to some historians. The modern vision of childhood as a distinct and bound phase of life, one of innocence and insulation from violence, did not begin to significantly take root in Europe until the early 1600s. Before that, many children generally did not have the right to be free from violence. The right was granted only to adults because adults defined themselves as free and moral against the unfree, immoral, and criminal young Countless diaries, letters, autobiographies, and medical reports detail routine mistreatment of children throughout history. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all European children suffered abuse or that all European mothers and fathers from the past parented with hardened, sadistic hearts. Parents across different cultures and times, whether they were German or British, French or Greek, loved their children, displayed tenderness, worried about them, and showed interest in the stages of their development. Some even advocated for humane treatment of the young. At the same time, many European parents also lacked the capacity to respond to their children's developmental behavior with empathy. As Demus explained, it is of course not love which the parent of the past lacked, but rather the emotional maturity needed to see the child as a person separate from himself. Naturally, this harsh treatment of children, along with the desire for land, profit, fame, and religious zeal to civilize and convert the poisoned souls of native people to Christianity, bred a culture of adult violence which drove conquest, colonization, slavery, and genocide. In fact, these practices were rationalized through seeing Africans and indigenous peoples as children, whom they felt free to brutalize, rape, and kill. That's a hell of a way to treat your children. Now, as far as I know, at one point, children were considered a gift. And up until recently in the black community, even when I was young, now I'm 54, but this is 30 something years ago, but they used to say, well, the child is a blessing. And I would say from the 90s on, children just became burdens. Things that you have to take care of and spend money on. And I think for the most part, that's what black parents will never tell you this, but that's really how they feel about their children. If you see the way they treat their children, they don't treat them like gifts or blessings. They treat them like burdens. As a result, for white kids, a different worldview developed by the 17th century. White children were slowly categorized as innocent and therefore entitled to claim rights against the violent treatment that was endemic to childhood before that period. By the 19th century, with changing attitudes about children's welfare, beatings gradually decreased for white children, although it did not disappear. It turned into a milder form of punishment called spanking. So when Africans and indigenous people became children, whites had to treat their children better. Because you can't say, these people are primitive, so we have the right to treat them that way, and then treat each other the same way. You have to kind of figure out a way to stop treating each other like that, to say, we're one group, we can't treat our own like that, and at least not directly. Where are we? Well, for centuries, childhood for Europeans was a period of systemic violence, labor exploitation, enslavement, and sexual abuse. But when Europeans sought to enslave Africans, they imposed the category of child on them and modeled their racist systems of exploiting black bodies on the long-standing ideologies of childhood and the brutal treatment of children in order to justify their enslavement. By the 17th century, a separate and unequal definition of childhood gained traction, with a childlike status encapsulating the permanent inferiority and savagery of blackness. In other words, white people began to recognize the vulnerability of their own children and had to rescue them, if only partially, from this unthinkable close proximity to blackness and the brutality of childhood. Also, we learned that Europeans would think of their children as small adults. There really wasn't like a thing called childhood adolescence. I guess that's why they treated them, they brutalized them so much. And then the young adults who can't defend themselves. So I don't know how much that was true or just something that they taught us. So much of what they taught us was not right, but I remember learning that. white adults begin to reconceptualize white childhood as a newly developed space of innocence, promise, and security. As such, white children were imagined as partial adults. See, yeah, there you go. Who could be gradually guided out of savagery and into whiteness by being educated and perfected to their highest potential, and afforded special protections because they would mature into future beneficiaries of white civilization. Black slaves, on the other hand, even in adulthood, were by definition irredeemable, wild animals, and eternal children whose bodies were always ready sites for exploitation, control, and brutal treatment. Nothing's really changed. This is where we are. And we're playing a lot of games, talking about how things are better, how things have gotten this, and how we need to stop playing games. We need to stop the denial and the delusion, and we need to come around. Or let's put it this way: those of us who are not deluded, we need to leave those deluded people over there and see what we can do. It's not many of us, but maybe if we can come together with the tech, we can get somewhere. And people who have resources and power, you're gonna have to skip over them too and come to us. Because if you don't, if you keep fueling that delusion, when the reality hits them and they explode, they're gonna explode on you. They're not gonna explode on us. We don't have anything for them to take or bother or harm. They're gonna explode on you. So get it together. Use this information in your life. Spare the Kids by Stacey Patton. I'll see you next time, and try to be safe and try to take care of yourself.